When you turn me,
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. I'm joined by an old friend who has been missed on the podcast for some time, just because she's in such great demand, not just speaking engagements, but her patients and the people she teaches. We're going to be talking to Dr. Elizabeth Yurth, who I affectionately call Betsy, about NAD. You know, I've learned from many people, and I always try to credit them when I say something, because I don't want to be an expert at anything. I'm a perpetual student. And one of the greatest things I learned from Joel Green is the concept of baby talk. We operate in this world, especially if you get your information from most internet sources. Joel talks about nothing is inherently good or bad, right? It's situational. And people who want to know, well, is this good? Is that bad? They talk in baby talk. It's always more complicated and complex than that. When you're talking about the human condition, regardless of whether you think we were intelligent design or God made us or evolution, I'm a big proponent of evolution because we could see pressures. And by the way, evolution is still happening. Right now, we are living with selection pressures that will curtail people from having children, and they will be out of the gene pool someday, hundreds of years from now. But the reality is that there is a compound that we are being force-fed today called NMN, nicotinamide. I don't even, you know what? I'm not even sure what it stands for anymore. NAD plus, nicotinamide riboside, NR. And we're being told that these compounds are the fountain of youth. And we're being told by people who are profiting from this message. And once again, we find ourselves in the world of baby talk. And it is never like that. Nothing is only good. Nothing is only bad. So it's important for you to arm yourself with information, because the new selection pressure is where you get your information from. That is the new selection pressure. So we're going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. I have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods, makers of the Sweet Roll. 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality dairy protein, 5 grams of net carbs, fantastic flavors, cinnamon, chocolate, and wild berry. These were made in the image of the Cinnabon, which is garbage. It's nothing good, but these are upgraded, if you will, and they're healthy. And also Tasty Pastries, which was the healthy alternative to a Pop-Tart. A lot of people love Pop-Tarts. Also great flavors, less than 1 gram of sugar, 5 net carbs, 20 grams of protein. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 to let them know you learned about them on Superhuman Radio. And now, without further delay. Hi, Betsy. How are you?
Hey, Carl. I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on again. Good to see you.
So before we talk about this topic, And we're going to start out with a variation of a presentation you recently did at an anti-aging show. The biggest horn, the biggest mouthpiece about these compounds is a doctor named David Sinclair, he's been on Joe Rogan's show. Everybody loves him. What people need to know about him is that he has simultaneously, while trumpeting the supposed anti-aging benefits of one of these compounds, has captured the market on it by having the FDA literally go after anybody selling it because he's coming out with his own product, his own offerings. Isn't that true?
Yeah, and NMN. I mean, David Sinclair is a big proponent of NMN because he has an NMN product, and unfortunately, has made it now widely unavailable for, like in California, you can't get it. So lots of places now, it's become more and more difficult to get NMN for those people who want to take it because really, and with the agenda, he's really just trying to promote his product, and which is fine. And I respect David Sinclair very much. He's an incredible researcher and has incredible knowledge. But the unfortunate thing is that when just like pharmaceutical companies, unfortunately, sometimes the financial incentives get in the way of really people's health and overall well-being. And I think that may be the case here. Absolutely.
And I have nothing bad to talk about. I have nothing against him, but I had the same feeling about Life Extension Foundation because they used to break the news about a potential supplement only when they had one to sell you. And I we've broken news on this show 18 years in November. I've never come out and said, well, let me come out with a product first before I talk to my audience about it. It's just a different mindset. So what is NMN? I'm going to put this and this family or the category of compounds. I'm going to put this slide up first.
So basically, what is NAD? I mean, NAD, no one is going to deny that NAD is actually critical to life. It is plays a crucial role in making ATP, right? You have to have NAD to make ATP. So it's absolutely critical to life for every single cell. And it basically is the electron donor. It's a NAD plus, basically donates its electron to NADH. And basically that is the step to make ATP in oxidative phosphorylation. But it also has a whole bunch of other processes. It upregulates the sirtuins, which we know are important for longevity. We know that it has immune cell signaling, has DNA repair. So NAD, beyond its role in oxidative phosphorylation to give us energy, and ATP has a huge number of other benefits. And so when we talk about NAD, nobody can say NAD is a bad thing. It is critical, absolutely critical to life.
Like oxygen's not a bad thing, right?
Exactly.
And the reality is that glucose is not a bad thing. But everything
or water, right? Everything
right.
is crucial in the right amounts. And that's really the problem, is when you're looking at things like NAD, and when we're talking about NAD is sort of the end game. And so people do things like NAD infusions, and honestly, NAD itself really can't get into the cells. You really have to take one of its precursors.
Right.
So either NMN, nicotine mononucleotide, or NR, nicotine riboside, and NMN and NR are precursors so that they can get carried into the cell, make NAD. NAD gets into the mitochondria where it's utilized to make ATP. And the problem is people say, well, I can measure NAD levels. The problem is you really can't measure NAD levels in the mitochondria. So if I'm feeding somebody over and over again NAD or any of its precursors, I have no idea when I've filled that tank. So what I tell people, it's a little bit like, you've got a water bucket that's leaking all over the floor, right? And I can keep that water bucket full and feel like, oh, great, my water bucket's full, without knowing that I've now completely ruined my hardwood floor. And that's the same thing that's true with NAD. So we can keep filling that bucket because we're like, okay, NAD we know if we get older, NAD levels get lower. So let's just keep feeding more and more NAD and we'll all stay young. And the problem is that NAD is being depleted because there's a hole in the bucket, because we're losing the NAD by some of the enzymes that are degrading it.
Let's talk about this phenomenon as proof that you need to supplement with something. As you get older, this gets lower. I remember reading a study. There was a girl who used to come on my show named Crispin Sullivan. And she was a smart girl. She was a researcher. She wrote articles for Weston A. Price, and she doesn't do it anymore. But she found a study that showed that people who had the lowest level of thyroid stimulating hormone tended to age better and live longer. And this would be counterintuitive, right? Because we give people thyroid hormone under the precept that their hormone is dropping and therefore they need more for energy, which, by the way, that's a misconception because thyroid hormone doesn't give you energy. In fact, it's the only natural mitochondrial uncoupler. And the higher your thyroid hormone is, the harder your mitochondria have to work to produce the same amount of energy. But that's a whole different subject. And what she discovered was elderly people whose TSH stayed stable or didn't rise as they age better. So we could say, oh, well, we don't want to mess around with thyroid hormone because it could. No, it depends. You have to know the output of T3 and T4 in order to take that information and have any meaning from it. But for some reason, anything that seems to diminish as we age is associated with, well, we need to supplement that.
So we need more of that. We need more of that, right?
It may not, your body actually may be diminishing it.
There may be a reason things are changing, right? There may be a mechanistic reason that the body is actually altering these things. Dr. Goodenow, who's done a lot of research on plasmalogens, talks about this a lot. That basically your cells have to change as they age. They are trying to accommodate for these changes in environmental forces, in your own internal forces. And if they don't change, if they stay the way they were when you're 18, you're actually not going to be able to adapt. That we have these adaptive changes that are occurring for a reason, right? And so simply saying, let's put everything back that we're deficient in, you have to look at why are we deficient, what's going on there. And that's a big key.
And those things are dynamic. Like they change. Again, I said before about selection pressure, and it's at work today. There are things in our environment that weren't in our environment in the 60s.
Right.
And we've seen lots of changes in people. Some of those changes may actually be accommodating these new environmental stressors that we didn't have back then. So just to assume that, oh, well, this is going lower, that's no good. You don't know. And this is the problem. Herein lies the problem. Few people want to take the time to understand and make critical choices on their own. And this is a good opportunity to plug something right now because it's too complicated. So they turn to experts. And quite often experts have monetary gains at hand. And, oh, well, NMN never made me feel any more energy than I normally do. Never. So does that mean I'm a non-responder? Does it mean my body makes enough NMN
maybe you didn't
NAD plus already? So I want to put this up because there's a good opportunity. BLI.academy is the website to go to. If you want to finally, I know it's a scary idea to be in charge of your own health. It is. That's why we turn to the pharmaceutical industry. They tell us what to take. But this is where you start, folks. Push yourself, especially if you're older. Here's a great opportunity to get your brain working again. Take some courses at BLI Academy and start to understand this stuff yourself. And don't do it because you want to be the smartest person in your group. Do it because you want to be able to discern what is bullshit and what isn't. There you go. BLI Academy.
Yeah, guys, we actually put together, it's called Human Optimization Academy. And the goal was to teach people like we think physicians should learn. So basically understanding your health, from scientific literature, from peer-reviewed literature, and not from, Instagram influencers who really 90% of them have a reason they're trying to influence you to something, right? They're getting paid for that. And so what we try to do is put together an academy and learning site with courses, and we have Q&A sessions monthly and there's a lot of physicians on this as well, but all kinds of people and all sorts of levels of education. But it's a way to hopefully learn some of this stuff from the scientific literature, where I try and digest scientific literature and give you back the data and help you interpret it to the best we can. And some things we just don't know, right? And that's in there too. But the goal is allow people to learn medicine, in a way that is from literature and not just from influencers who are trying to sell you something.
I had a friend named Dwayne O'Shields many, many years ago, and he used to say something that's really true. The difference between you and a physician, and I'm talking to the audience now, are the books they've read and the things that they've learned from those books. So there is knowledge out there that you can learn,
Right.
and you can be better armed to discern and make these decisions yourself.
Right,
And
exactly.
Dr. Yurth does an amazing job making it easy for people to learn these things. Go to bli.academy and check it out. Now, let's go on to another slide here. What are we learning in this slide here?
Well, I'm gonna let's
Oh,
let's
well,
back
that-
up a second, because I want to tell a little story, because I think, we keep trying to banish history, but we can learn a lot from history, right? And and so I want to tell a little story about a substance called radium, because it parallels a lot what we're doing with so much of the things now. And some of you guys may have heard the story, because it became a book and a movie. It's called the Radium.
Madame Curie.
Madame Curie discovered radium in 1898, right? And they found out that radium cured cancer. You could use radium, and we still use it, right? You can radiate cancer cells and cure cancer. It's like, oh my God, this is a magical substance. It cures cancer. So by the 1900s, it became, everybody wanted radium. It was, they actually started putting, if you were rich, you could buy radium infused water. You could buy radium jock straps, radium bras, radium toothpaste. I mean, it was put into everything for the elite people. And in fact, they hired women to paint watch dials using radium, and it became a really coveted job because it was this very expensive compound. And now these people could actually work in the radium plant and get this radium. And in fact, these women were around radium so much, and they were licking the little radium brushes, that they actually started glowing. So these women would walk around at night, and they would actually glow because they had so much radium influencing their, this fluorescence. And so now that was even more. That's really cool. Wow, this magical substance makes people actually glow. So it really was widely used. If you were rich, you could go, and just bathe in radium. And, like I said, it was put into everything, much like what we're doing with a lot of the substances we're talking about, like NAD, NMN, NR, and a host of other supplements that are out there, right? It took 32 years. So that was in 1900. People started really just using radium. People started noticing, like, people's jaws were getting bad and their teeth were falling out and all this bad stuff, but they didn't really equate it to the radium until like 1932, when this really elite, wealthy man developed horrible mouth cancer and his whole jaw fell off. And he realized it was the radium, and he sued the company, and it was, he had money enough. And it took until 1968, so 60 years later, before radium actually got banned from being put into substances. So for 32 years, people took this substance that we now know is toxic, right? And we kind of laugh. We're like, oh my God, who would do that? And yet, are we not doing the same thing? We don't know, right? We just don't know, because the radium in small amounts, it can cure cancer, right? In large amounts, it creates tumors, cancer, all sorts of horrible diseases. So that's where I really want to caution you guys, that there is, as Carl was saying, a little bit of something may be good. What is that little bit? We don't know. What is the right amount? We don't know. And that's where this whole NAD, NMN, and NR piece scares me. So now let's go to that slide you put up. Here's the biggest concept. It's not so much that we actually are losing our pool of NAD. It's really, it's that as we age, we start consuming more NAD. It's not that we're taking in less. The synthesis is the same. Most of us are getting enough from our diet. The synthesis is enough. So taking in nicotinamide in our diet, or niacin in our diet from eating your steak, eating your meats and your vegetables. So basically, most of us if you look at the little blue arrow there, we're still synthesizing just as much, but we're consuming a lot more as we age. So basically, we're depleting that pool, mostly because of some enzymes that get upregulated in senescent cells. As we get older, we have more and more senescent cells, or in people who have more diseases, more acute inflammatory states, they have upregulation of a couple of enzymes. So I think if you go to the next slide I gave you, Carl, so one of those enzymes is called, so if you look at the NAD consuming enzymes here, what upregulates these NAD consuming enzymes? So we've got all these nicotinamide riboside, nicotinamide, nicotinic acid, nicotinamide mononucleotide, NMN, all those we basically have. Now, what upregulates the consuming enzymes is everything bad that happens to us as we age, or because we're not healthy, disruptions in circadian rhythm, we're not getting enough sleep, we're not in the light, inflammation, so viruses, all those kinds of things, cancer, metabolic disturbances, mitochondrial dysfunction. These are all the things that are depleting the NAD stores. The problem is, if I just give back all this NAD, right, as NAD precursors or NAD itself, all I'm doing now is feeding into this depletion pool, right? So these consuming enzymes, as fast as I can give it, they're consuming it because the cells that really want it are these damaged cells. The fat cells want it. The cancer cells want it. The senescent cells want it. So so you're sitting there taking the stuff that's supposedly really good for you, but the enzymes that are upregulated in the most deficient cells are going to be utilizing it much more rapidly.
And we see this in Dr. Warburg supposedly won the Nobel Prize for discovering a way to detect tumors, but what he really did was he found out that tumors prefer glucose.
Glucose, right?
And so all cells need glucose. These
right.
The paradigm here is the sick cells gobble up more of what's good for healthy cells than their own fair share. And so just by increasing NAD, what you may end up doing is fueling these sick cells to either grow faster or replicate faster. And that's not a good thing. In fact, one of the studies that I read, let me put you back on. And this is one of those things. It's like, you know, you want to walk away with clarity, but sometimes the only clarity you get is it's not what you think it is.
Right.
They did
and we don't know, right?
Yes.
The clarity is we don't know.
Right. And it takes years longer. As time unfolds, we learn more. And that's why you can't dig your heels in sometimes in something you believe.
Exactly right.
Until enough time has gone past. But when they looked at lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, and one other, liver cancer, the interesting thing was that in some instances, the higher degrees of NAD sped, and NMN sped the cancer's growth, and in others it arrested it. So now you got to look at, well, what's the difference in this scenario? What's happening? This is when it becomes mechanistic, and this is my point of echoing Joel and saying it's not that it's baby talk. It's not only good. It's not only bad.
Right.
The best we can do is start to tease out and find out when it's good and when it's bad, and can we block the bad stuff somehow?
Yeah, I think that's so. There's two key enzymes that are depleting that NAD. So you keep putting the NAD in, or NMN or NR, all the same things. The two key enzymes. And I think the next slide shows one of them. So one of them is CD38, and CD38 is basically very, very upregulated in cancer cells, but in all aging cells. So all senescent cells have much higher levels of CD38. So again, what happens is you're feeding these senescent cells this NAD. CD38 is taking it and bringing it down some other pathways. And those pathways are actually feeding into inflammation and reducing the NAD stores even more. So now you put more NAD in, you're like, wow, now I feel like I need even more NAD. And so you keep putting more in. So if everything was perfect, if we had a perfect healthy cells and we didn't have any senescent cells and we didn't have any inflammatory macrophages, then we could put in a lot of NAD and probably be fine. The problem is that very few people, maybe your super healthy 18-year-old is going to be okay, but very few people don't have a senescent cell burden or don't have any ongoing inflammation. So one of the things that we found out is you can block CD38, right? So things like apigenin, you can use to block CD38. So if you're going to take any of these precursors like NAD or nicotinic acid, you want to probably block CD38 so that at least it's not being drained out of that hole in the bucket, right? Mm-hmm. So at least if you're going to be doing these, you want to block this enzyme. So you want to actually, if you're going to be taking your NAD, so you go get your NAD infusion or you take NMN, then you want to use CD38 along with it so that you're not, again, we're patching.
Is apigenin the only one that is over the counter?
Quercetin does as well.
Quercetin, yeah.
Quercetin can block. Apigenin is probably the best and maybe the worst, most well-known and maybe the least expensive of the bunch. But quercetin does a pretty good job of blocking.
Does time-restricted feeding, which I'm not proponent of doing it constantly. I do. In fact, I'm fasted today. I don't do that all the time. But is time-restricted feeding play a role in CD38 at all?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that, probably because you're upregulating stress a little bit during that fasted period of time, right? That maybe you're going to actually, that would be, that'd be a bad time that you to be doing things like NMN, because you're probably in a more stressed state. So you probably going to have these little higher levels of CD38 when you're in that more stressed state. You probably would want to do it more on the refeed side. If you're going to do your NMN, probably want to hit it more on the refeed side of that. So the rebuild.
And let's face it, it may not just be CD38. There may be other players here that just haven't been discovered yet that we can talk about.
There is another one that we don't talk about very much, and it's called NNMT. So
Right.
NNMT is a little farther down that pathway. Okay. And NNMT is really designed to actually get, so when you have this whole pathway is designed to be perfect. We're actually designed, certainly we are designed to keep in this perfect, what we call redox balance. Our reductive stress, our oxidative stress are perfectly balanced, right? When they get imbalanced, that's when the problem occurs. So the body really says, oh, there's too much NAD, there's too much nicotinic acid. Let's get rid of it, because now I'm getting too much of this oxidative stress state. So I'm going to get rid of it. So it's very well designed. So CD38 brings it down. And then NNMT is actually designed to actually add a methyl group to the nicotinamide and turn it into something called 1-methyl-nicotinic acid, or 1-MNA. And 1-MNA then actually has all these other health benefits. So it actually says, okay, let's take this extra nicotinamide, and because it's too much here, we don't want to give the mitochondria more. We've disrupted this whole reductive oxidative balance. Let's feed it. And so again, we're so intricately designed, it feeds it into another element called 1-MNA. And 1-MNA has all of these health benefits. 1-MNA, very similar to NAD, actually helps metabolic stress. It helps get rid of cancer cells. So basically, the body is really intricately designed to take this excess stuff and put it somewhere good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
is that something that's available? Is that available on the market?
So not yet. It's only available in one country in Europe. And they didn't actually want to bring it to the US because they were trying to bring it to the US as a pharmaceutical. And so they actually did not want to bring it in as a supplement. We've actually been working with a company called Longevity Labs to try and bridge that gap and bring it here. And hopefully by October, we'll have access to that supplement here in the US. If you guys go to 1MNA, so M as in mother, N as in nobody, A, 1MNA.com. There's a lot of information there about it that we've tried to put together to help people learn about this. So 1MNA, so basically we'll go back now and block this NNMT enzyme. So blocking this NNMT enzyme, NMT is a really bad enzyme because it's very linked to cancer and obesity and metabolic stress. So basically, so now we feed in 1MNA, so follow me here. You give too much NAD, goes down CD38, goes to NNMT. NNMT turns into 1-MNA. But now I've got to turn off NNMT. I don't want to keep feeding down that pathway. So if I get enough 1-MNA, which has all these benefits, it turns off NNMT.
Mm-hmm.
So NNMT blockers have been being looked at for treating cancer. They haven't found one yet. There's one. It's a peptide you're familiar with called 5-amino-1-MQ.
Mm-hmm.
So 5-amino-1-MQ, which, as you know, gives you more energy and helps stress mitochondrial function. It helps with fat loss. It helps with energy production. It has anti-cancer properties. So 5-amino-1-MQ is an NNMT blocker. So it's a basically small peptide that's very uniquely suited to block this enzyme, and by so doing, help get energy back. But the problem is when you block NNMT completely, you don't get any of this good stuff, the 1-MNA.
Right.
So the perfect answer is 1-MNA itself. So we've been trying to work with this company for, who makes it in the EU for a few years now, and they were stubbornly really set. We want to bring this is going to be the next best thing because it's going to cure cancer and all this stuff. But fortunately, the company kind of started running out of money to go through the whole FDA process, which, as we know, was going to take 20 years to get there. And it's basically just a food supplement. So we said, here in the US, bring it as a food supplement. You'll do a whole lot better. So I think we'll
definitely,
if you guys go look at the 1-MNA site. So it's pretty cool. So I think the whole key point here is that we've got to maintain this balance, right? So again, NAD is not good nor bad. And maybe giving it a little bit of it now and then is a good thing, right? So taking your NMN or your NR or your nicotinic acid, doing that periodically, right, is fine. At the same time, blocking that CD38 enzyme
with what, maybe a 1M
with apigenin, or quercetin, right? So you're going to take your NR or your NMN or whatever your heart's desire is, and I'll tell you, NAD infusions are really kind of silly. You spend a lot of money for something that actually can't get intracellularly where you need it.
Yeah.
But so the precursors are a better way to go. Nicotinic acid or niacin, nicotinamide are probably the easiest, cheapest ways, honestly, to do that. And then
so let's put this question up since you just invoked the name. Is it best to combine niacin and NMN to optimize NAD plus levels? Does pterostilbene have the same downsides as resveratrol?
So two different questions. So basically, I don't think you need both niacin and NMN. I think that NMN has, so basically NMN is, you can get into the cells. It has a receptor on the outside of cells to get intracellularly a little bit more easily than niacin, but niacin actually works fine. It's very cheap, easy. The problem with niacin is that niacin obviously has more side effects. You know, when you take niacin, it causes that flushing. It's hard to high dose niacin. High dose niacin can cause disruptions in glucose metabolism. So you have to be a little more careful with dosing niacin. But niacin works. So does nicotinamide, which does not have those same effects. So I think NMN and NR are probably your best precursors. But again, you've got to block CD38. And again, you would want to do this very periodically. You don't want to be doing any of those continuously.
Right.
Now, pterostilbene and resveratrol both have the same downside in that I'm not a big fan of continuously taking antioxidants. And pterostilbene is not as strong as an antioxidant as resveratrol is, so it's probably a little bit safer. But both of those, you want to microdose and you want to use them periodically. Remember, guys, this whole redox balance is absolutely critical to longevity. So you have to have oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is actually key. That's why, you know, when you exercise, you create oxidative stress. That's what rebuilds muscle, right? So if we don't have any oxidative stress, we're not going to do well. So if I am always taking a high dose of resveratrol and I'm always blocking oxidative stress, I'm actually doing myself a disservice. So what you want to do is use those in very, very small, low doses, like not 500 milligrams of resveratrol, but like 50 milligrams of resveratrol.
You know, the funny thing is that IGF-1 stimulates cancer through a push-pull mechanism. A lot of people don't realize it's a very, very powerful antioxidant, aside from being a growth factor. So by turning off oxidative stress, ROS, you actually promote the growth and survival of cancer cells. Tumors.
Right. You need oxidative stress. You need oxidative stress. That's why you don't want to, go work out and then take a bunch of antioxidants, like go work out and then pound a bunch of vitamin C, and because you're actually just undid that oxidative stress.
What you worked hard for,
right? What you just worked hard for. That oxidative stress is key. It's also just sort of key to our longevity. So you really want to keep this redox balance. So I will say using those things periodically, with your antioxidants, I tell people, it's fine to use antioxidants. You want to cycle them on and off. You want to use them at appropriate time of the day. You want to use them cycled not around your exercise. So basically you've got to be really careful with all these antioxidants, which in small amounts, again, are good. In large amounts are not so good. And yet people are pounding. They're like, oh, resveratrol is a really good thing. Let's take
look at all the people taking Buckminster Fullerene, because it's the most powerful antioxidant.
Right.
But there are no really good human studies on it. We have some rodent studies where we go, wow, these rodents lived a long time, so we should take it too. Well, no one's looking at whether or not that's fueling cancer. They're just people are just taking it willy-nilly. Oh, I'm taking this in olive oil every single day. This is the strongest antioxidant in the world. Well, guess what? If you are taking a powerful antioxidant and you happen to have cancer, you're just going to fan the fire.
Right. I mean, that is it's the hardest thing, I think, about the kind of medicine that we promote is sort of that fine tuning of what is the right amount of things, and that's very hard. And I think you guys really have to be cautious about this because, again, all these things in small amounts used periodically are good. All these things in these massive doses that people are doing because, oh my God, resveratrol is the next, and again, David Sinclair, big fan of resveratrol, the next best thing to slice bread is that it basically is such a potent antioxidant that you've lost all your oxidative stress. Remember, if I have too much of reductive balance, either you can be too much oxidative stress. That's bad. It's too bad to have too little oxidative stress too. And so the same thing's true about, doing these things where I'm giving NAD for massive amounts, if I keep doing that, I'm going to disrupt this redox balance. The body is so designed perfectly. So we have to be really, really careful when we start screwing up this perfect balance.
Right.
So I
throw
think
this.
we have to look at what happens as we age. Why are these things being depleted, right? And that's where this whole NAD, you've got to look at these enzymes, the CD38, but I think more importantly, this NNMT. And again, when this 1-MNA gets to us, which we're hoping is, the company's going to start bringing here as of October that you'll be able to get it. But if you go to 1mna.com, keep tabs on it. I'm really excited for this because I think it may be the answer to raising NAD levels and helping obesity, cancer. There's so many companies that are racing to the show on trying to find NMT blockers. And again, 5-MeO-1MQ is a decent NMT blocker, but it's pricey. It's hard to get, right? It's expensive to take 5-MeO-1MQ consistently. So basically 1-MNA is something you could take regularly, and blocking NMT, but feeding remember what NMT is making is 1-MNA. We need some 1-MNA.
Yeah, right.
So basically, you don't want to block NMT. So if you did 5-MeO-1MQ, you wouldn't want to continuously do it.
Right. You have to have, and people need to start microdosing stuff.
Things. Exactly. Microdosing stuff and using things intermittently. Like all you guys who are taking terastillabine, resveratrol, do them intermittently. They're good things intermittently. Small doses intermittently are probably beneficial. But again, the body operates under an abundance or a scarcity of certain things. And my first time being exposed to this was growth hormone in children of idiopathic short stature. They gave the same weekly dose of growth hormone to two groups of children. I think there was like 20 kids in each. One group, they gave an equal dose daily. And one, they gave them staggered doses that at the end of the week, they ended up with the same dose. And what happened was the kids who got the staggered doses, maybe instead of getting 3, they give them mad amounts, like 25 IUs a week, 35 IUs. Instead of giving these kids, with 3 IUs a day for whatever, they gave them 6 on this day, skip the next day, just some random dosing. And the trajectory of growth in the kids who got the irregular dosing was dramatically more than the kids who got the standard dosing. We also see this in fish oil. People who take fish oil take the same dose daily. The omega-3s start to become used as a substrate for energy and not stored. And you want them stored. That's how they suppress inflammation. So, and again, when you look at this from an evolutionary standpoint, we never ate the same amount of fish day in and day out. Oh, I'm going to have 6 ounces of fish today. No, we ate fish until we ran out of it, and then we didn't eat it again for maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks. The body is used to getting what it needs, but not getting it consistently day in and day out. When it gets it consistently day in and day out, it starts doing funky stuff with it. Right. It's just like when you talk about fasting, right? Or time restricted eating. It's the same thing. Our bodies are designed to kind of go up and down, right? So there's always this balance, right, between mTOR and AMPK. mTOR is your buildup, AMPK is your sort of think about mTOR as your bodybuilder and AMPK as your endurance athlete, right? So in general, you want this balance of, you don't want to be just the endurance athlete who's super skinny, has no muscle, but you don't want to be this massive bodybuilder who has no AMPK. So you really want this balance of mTOR and AMPK. So when you fast, what happens? You suppress mTOR, right? So you're in this AMPK balance. Well, if I stayed there, I'm actually going to lose all my muscle, and I'm going to, that's why all these mTOR suppressing drugs, you've got to be careful, like metformin. So basically, if I stay there and stay always, I'm not going to be able to build muscle. So what we want to do is push down mTOR, push it back up, push down mTOR, push it back up. So you want to keep this thing. That's why the fasting, refeeding, all have a really good place. And the same thing is true. I think we think about that with fasting, refeeding, but we don't think about it with our supplements. So I always like to sort of think about supplements in sort of this cyclical fashion where I go through, this rebuild for the mTOR growth phase, right? So I'm going to take things during my growth phase that are much more, sort of stimulating the buildup things. That's where you might want to do your NMN a little bit higher dose, or, when that oxidative stress is going to be dealt with a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to do things that are the opposite direction. Just like taking the drug rapamycin, for all those of you guys who take rapamycin for its longevity benefits, right? Rapamycin's blocking mTOR. You do that continuously, you die. But taking it periodically, are we doing some benefit? probably.
Thymosin beta 4 is another one of these interesting. When you take a bolus dose, like 5 milligrams once a week, it triggers a cascade of events that take a while to happen. And if you take it daily or even in small doses daily, you don't see this, but it provokes changes that can reduce fibrotic tissue in the body,
Right.
actually turn neonatal genes back on to repair organs. But if you take it daily, it doesn't do that. It only does that when you take this big dose and then back off.
Right. Right. So you want to, and there's a lot of peptides that are like that, right? That we actually want to dose them, like MOD-SC, where you want to, some mitochondrial peptides where you want to dose them more intermittently, doing a higher dose a couple of days a week and not sort of a smaller dose continuously, because we're trying to actually create these sort of processes. And so that it is really something I think that when you guys look at there's very few supplements that, I'm taking magnesium regularly and maybe my D3K2 but there's very few supplements that I'm going to be taking on a continuous basis. Most of my supplements I'm rotating through. That's also good because you're not taking 500 supplements at one time as well, basically, right? You can now sort of cycle things. So you really want to think about that. Going through phases where, okay, now I'm going to create a little more oxidative stress, get rid of all my antioxidants, and now I'm going to go back into getting back on my antioxidants. So really, guys, think about everything you do. You do that with your eating too, right? I think that's, this whole sort of debate, right? Protein's really good for us. Like, I'm in the protein camp, right? I love muscle building. I'm in a protein camp. I believe in protein. I think people need a lot of protein. But then you read Longo studies that say, well, people who eat high protein diets don't live as long. The key is that you want to periodically sort of cycle that down, right? So I'm going to generally be doing my high protein diet. Then periodically, I probably want to bring it down, bring my protein
fat. You could just do the Bulgarians learned this. They had the greatest weightlifters in the world in the 60s and even into the 70s. They used to regularly do protein fasts,
right?
Where
protein sparing diet, right?
2-3 days in a row, and then they would go back and eat protein, and the boomerang effect was amazing.
Right. You get this really big rebuild effect when you do that.
Yeah, because the body goes, holy shit, we're not getting protein. Next time we get it, we got to do the right thing with it. Boom.
Exactly right.
And that's the abundance and scarcity phenomenon that the body plays on.
Right. And that's when you look at these debates where, these battles that are going on between the high protein, low protein diet. What I tell people is, in general, what you want to do is, we want muscle, you need the high protein, but you're going to have to go through protein sparing periods. And that's what we're going to see the longevity effects of a higher protein diet is when you're doing the protein sparing in between. And nobody really talks about that. Everybody's in the camp of, oh, well, protein's bad or protein's good.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. It comes back to the simplistic way that people want to be informed. They just tell me what to eat.
What to do.
Wait a minute, I got to cycle it. Well, how do I cycle it? Can you write it out for me so I know that Wednesday what I'm eating? It's like people just, if they learn, they'd be able to figure this out. Let's look at this last slide here, Betsy. Hold on.
So this is that enzyme I was talking to you guys about, is NNMT. So NNMT is basically taking all that excess nicotinamide. You couldn't use it anymore. Your mitochondria were tapped out, right? And your body's like, okay, there's too much NAD. I got to get rid of it. So it goes down. NNMT basically takes it, turns it into 1-MNA. But look at all the diseases that NNMT is upregulated in. So every cancer has high levels of NNMT. Every inflammatory condition has high levels of NNMT. So now you guys are giving tons and tons of NAD or NAD precursors. And now the cells that have the highest levels of NNMT, the cancer cells, the fat cells, the inflamed cells, the senescent cells, they are the ones that are now taking all that excess NAD that you just gave, feeding it down into this pathway and utilizing it for their own benefit. So like I said, this is a big field in cancer right now, is what can we use to block this enzyme? Because if we can actually block this enzyme, we can treat a whole bunch of different cancers. So here you guys are doing something that's upregulating this enzyme, right? Unknowingly, because you don't know when you fed too much NMT. Again, let's go back to that bucket that your bucket's full. You're feeling really happy. My bucket's full. And your floor is now completely flooded and your carpet's flooded and everything's a mess. And you just keep filling that bucket and filling that bucket and filling that bucket. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense when you think about it in that phenomenon, yet we're doing it all the time with these NAD precursors. So that's where this 1-MNA, so NNMT basically makes 1-MNA. 1-MNA helps, so it's good. So for a while, it's a great thing. but we need to go back and block NMT when we get too much. So that's why we really have been. This is the only substance to date that we know of, and again, they've been keeping it kind of under wraps, away from us. So hopefully we'll have access to it in the U.S. But fingers crossed, if all goes well, Longevity Labs should be able to get it for us by October. So basically, I think we've talked a lot about the whole key piece here that I hope everybody, your listeners, kind of take to heart, is that like anything, there's, you like glucose, like water, like exercise, like anything, is it really does figure out what is the right dose of everything. And all I can say right now is I have no idea what the right.
Well, let's be clear. No one does.
No one does.
Dr. Sinclair doesn't know.
Sinclair doesn't know.
No one does.
And people, and I just got in a big discussion. I was at at RadFest conference, and I was talking to a big discussion with a guy who's a big NMN guy, as a thing on market. He has a company that measures intracellular levels of NAD, and he said, "Well, I know the intracellular level, so I know how much people need." The problem is, guys, intracellular is not intramitochondrial. And if you look at the ratio, so in the cytoplasm, there's markedly more NAD than what's in the mitochondria. So how much do I know? Mitochondria doesn't want too much. So if I have the excess that's in the mitochondria, you don't know it by measuring cytoplasmic levels. So cytoplasmic levels may look fine. They look great and ample, and the mitochondria are overfed with it. So they're trying to dump it off. So nobody can measure mitochondrial levels. We do not have the technology to do that. And that's where this supplement, is this compound NAD, is doing its most important work, is inside the mitochondria. We don't have any way of measuring that. So until we get better technology, until we have a better understanding, what I would just say is we need to be cautious with these things.
Yeah, I would say take lower doses, because
take lower doses and periodically, or use the 1-MNA instead. That would be my answer, is, when we have access to it. I think it's going to be a better way of raising these levels. But for now, I think using, NMN or NR or nicotinamide, and using a CD38 blocker like quercetin or epigenin, and then using, an NMT blocker when we have them. So let's see. Question is, using niacin before workouts.
No, so I posted this the other day. I did a little video to enlighten people what niacin does to free fatty acid sequestration in the liver. So I said, if you're trying to deplete glycogen, you can take a small amount, 200 milligrams of niacin, which will cause some flushing, but not terrible, pre-workout. And what's going to end up happening is your body's going to use all the glucose it can, because the free fatty acids are sequestered. I learned this from a doctor here in town that was on the original team to develop Gatorade in Florida. And the original version of Gatorade was supposed to have 200 milligrams of nicotinic acid per jug. The reason they took it out was because of the niacin flush, and people got too itchy. But they put it in there because when you sequester fat from the bloodstream, it acts as a somatostatin inhibitor. And so your body can produce more growth hormone. But these aren't crazy amounts of growth hormone where you should start taking niacin, because because my fear is somebody hears that and they're going to start selling niacin as a growth hormone producer. But one of the things that it did was it increased serum levels of growth hormone, but it made you itchy, and it impaired performance, because unless you're in a state where you're fully carbed up, fatty acids play a big role in energy production, and you're shutting them off. So he's asking, you recently mentioned using niacin before workout. That's me. Niacin, NMN, etc., all deplete methyl groups, while exercise increases methylation. There is a paper mentioning that niacin supplementation impairs exercise performance. It does. And then he goes on, don't you think depleting methyl groups undoes the benefits of exercise as it depletes methyl? I guess methylation, I guess he says.
So you're spot on here, because that is one of the problems of this, is that basically you are when you take a bunch of niacin or NMN, you are depleting methyl groups. That's where this whole down regulation process is, and that's where using the CD38 blockers or things like that is probably going to be better for you in terms of that. I think niacin in a low dose, because you can get that vasodilatation effect from niacin. So much like, so that can give you that muscle pump when you go to work out, which is, one of the reasons they put it into a lot of the pre-workout drinks. They put a little niacin because you get that sort of flushed pump, feeling. And so you get that vasodilatation effect, which probably has some benefit, again, getting glucose to the muscle. So I do think, a small dose of niacin might be beneficial, but I do think you do have the concern. I agree with you there. And I would do that as an inconsistent basis on harder workout days using a small dose of niacin, because I do think you have the concern about what you're doing with methylation and whether that's impeding some of the overall benefits of it. So I think that again, what dose is correct? Don't know the answer to that. I think it's probably going to be, we've been experimenting with very low doses of just nicotinic acid before workout.
What do you consider low doses?
I would say like 50 milligrams, honestly.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a low dose.
You don't feel anything.
Where you don't get, some people will still get a flush with that, but most people don't get a flush. So we use a combination of like a low dose leucine and low dose nicotinic acid together. New BioAge makes a product that it's basically it's called Leucinergy. It has a little low dose leucine and some nicotinic acid, and that can really help with sort of the fat burn, muscle building effect. So basically a low dose of leucine, like a gram or two of leucine combined with a low dose of nicotinic acid, like 50 milligrams, seems to have a very significant benefit in terms of helping that sort of fat loss, muscle building when you're exercising. So I think that might be a better way to go. I don't think we need to do these massive doses of niacin. I think we need to more microdose it and probably get the same benefits.
I want to put this up again, bli.academy. If you want to be well-versed, understanding science to guide your life, be the steward of your health, this is a great place to spend some money and take some courses. BLI Academy. Have we covered everything we can? I know people probably confused, but that's good. If you're confused, then this show worked, because these compounds are not only good, and they shouldn't be taken as only good, no matter who's promoting them. The human body is much more complex and intricate. There's nothing that's only good. Nothing, I say, nothing at all. It's all dependent on the circumstances and situations that you're undergoing at the time. Have we covered this topic?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the take-home message is, number one, why is NAD deplete out of our cells? Why is it getting lower? It's because of upregulation of these enzymes, CD38 and NMT, which are upregulated as we age because we have more senescent cells and more precancer cells and more inflammatory cells. So more the type 2 macrophages, the inflammatory macrophages. So basically these enzymes, the reason the NAD is going down is because of the upregulation of these enzymes in the damaged cells. So does it make sense to feed more NAD in when I have not gotten rid of the problem? So you need to look more at getting rid of these enzymes that are depleting the NAD as opposed to just feeding in more NAD, giving small amounts periodically, blocking these enzymes. And again, with the knowledge that, maybe in another year, you and I will be having a different conversation. Maybe NAD will be proved to be the cure all for everything. But right now it appears not. And I think
especially if you have senescent cells, I think that if you have senescent cells, it may not be good for you. And a lot of people carry senescent cells.
Most of us, right? Even if you're, you and I are doing tons of things to get rid of senescent cells, but most of us still, unfortunately, have senescent cells. I mean, it's just the unfortunate thing about getting older.
Being human.
More levels of senescent. And most of us, unfortunately, have inflammatory processes going on. Like it or not, very few of us have zero inflammation. I don't care if you see reactive protein is zero. You probably have some low-grade inflammation, especially with all the crap that we're exposed to everywhere. So I think that's the key, is to understand that we really need to start looking at smaller doses of things done intermittently, not looking at the science behind things and not at people just trying to sell us a product. Again, if you guys want to learn a little bit more about these pathways at 1mna.com, hopefully they're put together a nice little sort of pathway descriptions of understanding that. I think it's going to be a really nice player in this field that we don't have anything for right now. But I think that's sort of the take-home message, is just to throw a little caution into people.
Yeah,
I don't
nothing
think
is only good.
Right.
Okay, I have 10 minutes. I have two things I want to throw at you we didn't discuss before. So ARBs are the big choice for bodybuilders today, right? but are they inappropriate? If you I feel like I'm going to do my thesis now. So angiotensin receptor blockers or angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors work in a metabolically deranged model because insulin has to be raging for ACE to be that high, where depleting ACE or blocking the receptor will help you lower your blood pressure. Is that would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, on a simplistic basis, yeah.
So if I'm someone who has model blood sugar levels, I'm not oozing insulin day in and day out, an ARB and an ACE inhibitor would not be a good choice for me.
Well, the angiotensin receptor blockers, two different categories of drugs, right? The ACE inhibitors and the angiotensin receptor blockers. I love the
Not
angiotensin.
androgen. It's the
ARBs, angiotensin receptor blockers, like telmisartan, like losartan and telmisartan. I actually think, no, those have huge benefits because they're so beneficial to endothelial function beyond glucose control metabolism. I love telmisartan. I take telmisartan for its health benefits from endothelial function. Whether I have high blood pressure or not, I do take 20 milligrams. It helps increase exercise performance. We know that it's longevity producing. We know that people who take telmisartan live longer. They have less dementia. And that's because of its effect on the endothelial lining. So, even if you don't have high blood pressure, 20 milligrams of telmisartan can have huge longevity benefits. I mean, it's a longevity drug, and it's because
telmisartan work is good.
And telmisartan probably is the most research behind the longevity piece, but losartan works well too in that realm. Telmisartan may have some hinge on just a little bit mechanistically on where it might have more longevity benefits from it. But I take 20
milligrams of olmesartan. That's what I'm saying, 20 milligrams of olmesartan.
I don't know. Olmesartan's a little bit newer in that category, so I don't really know. You would think that the ARBs
it's banned by the Olympic.
All of the ARBs are, because they do increase exercise performance. I will tell you, I take 20 milligrams. I can feel a difference when I do any kind of endurance work. So the ARBs are banned for a reason. I mean, that's that little Russian figure skater. That's what she got caught on was an ARB. And then she said, well, she got it from her grandfather accidentally, and but not. So basically they are good drugs for exercise performance. I like these drugs. I mean, I think, for you, great, because you're not gonna have another stroke, but honestly, I like these drugs, and I have a lot of my patients who have any kind of endothelial dysfunction, much like Cialis or Viagra, right? They have huge longevity benefits because
I take 5 milligrams of that now too.
Yeah, you should do 5 milligrams. Everybody should be doing 5 milligrams of a day, because those have really good effects on helping repair the endothelial lining, increasing nitric oxide. So those are, the big benefits of those drugs. And, and I think they're really good drugs. Now, the ACE inhibitors are a little bit different, although ACE inhibitors are interesting in terms of some of their antiviral properties, because people on ACE inhibitors didn't get COVID. There's a lot of, effects there. But I don't think they have the longevity provoking benefits that the ARBs do.
Okay, last thing I want to mention to you. So I have worked with some bodybuilding type athletes in the past year, who many of them were provoked by yours and my show about oxytocin and trenbolone and why trenbolone works. So I've discovered that if you blend your oxytocin to be 2 micrograms per half a milliliter and do site injections. So you train your back. You want to make your biceps blow up, because oxytocin in its native state seems to be what provokes protein synthesis. And so I've got people now injecting
it right into the muscle,
and we're seeing amazing stuff. And then I talked to a friend of the show, and I don't want to mention his name because he works with pro athletes. But he is mixing it with IGF-DES, and he said it's. But we're talking
I imagine so. I mean, we do a lot of local injections of IGF, right? And you don't have to worry about the brain exploding from the head rush from oxytocin. You don't get that big effect.
It's not getting systemic. It's just being delivered into muscle, and that's it.
That's cool.
Thought I'd share that with you because I know
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay, one more time. I'm going to put this up. Hopefully, people pay attention. Go to BLI Academy. Be smarter. Hey, if you go to BLI Academy and take some courses, I'm going to be off the air at the end of the year. You could take over the show. We'll work out a deal. You got to go to BLI Academy first and prove to me that.
Yeah,
you
go
know,
learn stuff. Yeah, guys, I really encourage you to learn from science. And remember that most influencers, I get this so much where people are like, well, so-and-so said this was the best thing. I'm like, do you know they got paid $20,000 to say that? I mean, I know these influencers and I know what they're getting paid. And so you do have to really be careful with what's out there and really look at the science and try and understand the science. And I know it's hard. It's much harder than somebody just saying, take this, but you really do have to look at the science and sort of negate things when you know somebody is making a lot of money off it.
Let's not wait so long to get together again. Okay, please.
Yeah.
Okay. It's great having you on the show.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi, Carl.
All right. We'll see everybody. I got a show tomorrow. I'm off the rest of the week. So Monday and Tuesday, we have a great show tomorrow. Tune in. Don't forget, share this show. You never know who you're going to help by sharing a show. Take care, Betsy.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.